Alrighty, we are back for another state test review video. Today we're talking about standard F.IF.5. Let's hop right in. Molly tracks the time and distance of her hike, expressing distance as a function of time on the graph shown. What is the domain of the function? So, we're going to be talking a lot this video about domain and range. Okay, domain represents the set of all x values, and the range represents the set of all y values. And the way you can remember this, if you forget, if you can remember domain and range, domain comes before range in the alphabet, just as x comes before y in the alphabet. So we're talking about what is the domain of this function. When you're testing a domain of a continuous graph, what you do is you start from the left side of the graph, you run your pen over it, you find the leftmost point of the graph. A leftmost point here, xy's, is at x equals 0. Then you run all the way to the end of the graph, to the right end of the graph, the furthest right your graph goes, which is right here at x equals 4. So your domain would be between x values between 0 and 4, which is A. There are sometimes you would have to exclude something. For example, if this circle was open instead of closed, you would have had to exclude that. But since that was not the case here, we're all good. I apologize in advance for if you hear my dog. He is very sensitive to barking at anything and everything that is outside. Alright, question 2. Which graph represents a function whose domain is the set of non-negative real numbers? So, if you remember when we did interval notation, the set of non-negative real numbers would mean that this would have a domain of anywhere from 0 to infinity. That's what you're looking for. Which of these has a domain that goes from 0 to infinity? It can't be A, because A has a graph that goes negative. B, we could be onto something. I'm sorry, that's C. C, we could be onto something. B, we could potentially be onto something. And D has negative numbers, so it's not that. So which graph represents a function whose domain is the set of non-negative real numbers? Give me 1 second. I'm going to see if I can get my dog to calm down. Alright, hopefully the doggo has been satisfied. Alright, so back to this question. So now, like I said, B might be onto something, C might be onto something, but let's talk about why it is C and not B. Because this says that this represents a function. Okay? A function means that you cannot have repeating x's. A function cannot have repeating x's. And we talked about in a previous video that the way you test graphs is via the vertical line test. And if you do the vertical line test fails like here and here and here and here and here and here. So that means that B is not a function. So while it would have a domain of all non-negative real numbers, it is not a function and therefore is disqualified from this question. So it is C. Question 3. The graph of a function is shown. What is the domain of the function? Again, we're talking domain, so we're talking x's. So we go to the farthest left the graph goes, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4. So this would be at -4. and then the farthest right that the graph goes. This arrow indicates that this graph continues to go, this line continues to go off the graph. It goes on and on and on forever and ever and ever. Okay, so if this is going on and on and on forever, that would mean that it could go all the way to infinity. So we don't have an endpoint that we can use. So all we're going to be able to say is that x is greater than or equal to -4, because it could be anything greater than that. It can't be b, because -3 is involved in here, as is -4. It can't be c, because it goes past 0. It can't be d, because it goes past 1. So it is a. Question 4. The graph of the function f of x equals -1/2 x squared plus 2x minus y is shown. What is the domain of the function? Okay. This equation is irrelevant. It's asking you what's the domain of the function. You don't need to know anything about the equation to know the domain of the function. What you need to know is how far left it goes and how far right it goes. And you can see by this arrow and this arrow that, as I said last question, the arrows mean that it's going to go on infinitely. And since we don't see a definite endpoint, we do not see a definite endpoint, okay, we assume it goes on forever in both directions. So in this case, we're going to put the answer all real numbers. If we did this in interval notation, we would say this goes from -infinity to infinity. However, this is not in interval notation. This is an inequality notation, of which we use all real numbers. Question 5. The graph of a function is shown. Select a sign for each box to show the domain of the function. So they tell you the domain. The domain is -4 to 5. All they're asking you to do is say, is this greater than, is this less than or equal to? The way that you know the answer to this question is purely by the dots. If the dot is filled, it has extra stuff in the dot, then you want the extra thing on the sign. This would be less than or equal to. If the dot is empty, like this one, it is just less than. It's not included. If it has the stuff in it, then you have the stuff on it. If it doesn't have the stuff in it, then you don't have the stuff on it. Simple as that. Alright, so that's going to do it for this standard. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. And good luck on your test.